Hey everyone, my name is Stephen Weigel, and today we are going to get into the nitty-gritty of the Angine de Poitrine polymeters. That's right, Angine de Poitrine polymeter tier list. So, I'm going to be ranking these songs based on how great I think the polymeter is, and subjectively, to my ear, as a person who really enjoys polymeters and getting groovy in weird ways, I'm looking for polymeters that I think groove hard, that also use constructs that I don't see everywhere or a lot, or that do something innovative with the structure. So I'm kind of looking for all of those things together, and some of these results might disappoint you because you might find that I heard that there was something in it that had been done a lot, and so you're disappointed that I ranked it lower. But I am really looking for those kinds of polymeters that you don't see a lot in this sort of rock music. So I'm going to be ranking things by volume 1 and volume 2 here, and you can see that I've done something cute where the volume 1 songs are all having white squares and tilted to the left, while the volume 2 songs all have black squares and tilt to the right. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, first, Sherpa. So Sherpa kind of feels like a big double tresillo to me, and that's been done in pop music so many times, you know, that kind of 2-on-3 stuff, so I mean, I really like it. It's really energy building, and the solo in it is really cool. But I don't think the polymeter is that innovative, and I don't think they restructure a lot in it. So it doesn't seem that clever to me, even though it hits hard. So I'm going to go ahead and put it in D tier here. Okay, next up, Toghad. This one's kind of cool. I really like how in 7 it kind of sounds like I don't know what you would call it. There's a song I'm thinking of that goes like dun 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 dun. So it kind of sounds like that groove, but you take away the 8th beat with this dun 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 dun. I think that's very clever, but I don't think they change a lot about the structure over time. Again, I'm looking for sort of these like clever evolving constructs or ways to add up the beats differently or things like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and put Toghad in D tier as well. Even though it is in 7. Sorry, just being in an alternative time signature does not cut the mustard. There must be something working on the inside to make me confused. Okay, next up, Tamebs. This one is kind of in 4/4. It's pretty straight. Really, really cool stuff in it, though. I like the introduction and how the low note recontextualizes it, and also the you know, like that's pretty cool stuff, and you see like the dancing and everything. But yeah, again with this one, I'm not feeling a lot of the clever restructuring that I get in many of their other songs, so I'm gonna go ahead and put Tamebs in D tier. Okie doke. Next up, Ababa Hotel. Now this one has got another groove in 7, but there's a piece where they, you know, stop doing the 7/8 groove a little bit, and they put in the 7/4 with the drums, and I think that's a pretty radical shift because it happens so late in the song too that you think it's probably not going to happen, right? Because a lot of times in these narrative arcs, things will maybe like happen in the middle. So that one really genuinely caught me by surprise, and I thought was pretty cool. And I also noticed that like there's that part where there's a big guitar lick that's just a constant stream of notes that's being played in 7 over it, right? But the groupings, I don't know what string exactly is being played on or how this is being grouped, but it feels like those notes are grouped a little bit in 3 just due to the physiology of how it's played on the guitar and not due to how the 3s are being stretched. But I don't know to what extent that's on purpose, but I thought that was really nice because then at the dropout where we hear those guitar arpeggios, we have groups of 3 notes, which would give you like groups of 6 eventually, right? Going against the 7 that you'd like to feel from the normal groove, but since the 7 groove isn't there to reinforce it, you're just a little bit lost if you're not counting along in 7, and I think that is an absolutely delightful effect, and so for that reason, I believe I'm going to put it in B tier. There we go. Okay, fantastic. Next up, Sahardnier. Now this one is, it uses 3-on-2 stuff, but I'm going to argue that it's like Sarniez, where it's not just that, or not like Sherpa, where it just feels like just that. There's, you know, they do that thing in this one, I think, where they start with a groove, and they're really starting on the offbeat, so the entrance is a bit weird. And so that's nice, because you're already displaced when you begin. And I think another reason I really like this one is because, like, if you're, you know, dividing into 6 subdivisions and you keep going with that, you kind of sound like you're in compound time a lot of the time. And in the middle part, where the drums start to switch to grouping the subdivisions into groups of 2 instead of groups of 3, I think we hear that in a way where the phrase is elide. And that's cool, and something I did not expect of Angine, and not something I describe as part of their style. Like, what I'm saying is, if there's a big group of, subdivisions, and let's say you have one discrete group, in the next discrete group, you could change how you're emphasizing the beats so that the subdivisions seem to land in different places, but you still have the same overall amount of beats. So in Saharnier, you hear that transition happen at the end of one of these discrete groups, instead of just one discrete group, next discrete group, like in all the other songs. So I thought that was really clever, and they're also playing with it a little bit earlier in the song. And so I thought that was kind of a unique take on 3-on-2 stuff, and it was pretty exciting, and I was lost for a moment, and when I was trying to count how they were doing it when it sounded like it was in 4/4 instead of in 6/8, I didn't really, add it up exactly right the first time and all that stuff, so I think that's pretty cool. So I think, since it's still 3-on-2, it's not going to be a super high tier one, but still, pretty high up there, so I'm going to go ahead and put Saharnier in B tier. Okay, next up, Labrick. It's in 7. That's all I got. D tier. Okay, next up, Volume 2. We're going to do Fabiank next, or Fabiank? Is that how it's pronounced? I'm not sure how it's pronounced. But of course, this one is really funny because, I think that bass riff that happens in the second half, I'm starting to find it obnoxious because it's everywhere. But it's really cool that it's in 7. I don't like the quarter notiness of it very much, compared to some of their other groovier things. But I really like the beginning. In fact, it's funny, right? You see people cover Fabiank and Sarniez to death all the time. Those are the big 2 songs. And I think Sarniez has more going for it, personally. But, well, I don't know. Maybe Fabiank and Sarniez are really similar that way. But everybody covers that second part of Fabiank with the easy quarter notey bass riff, and not the first part with, the cool displaced offbeat and the insane 7-on-4 polymeter. A testament to Fabiank and its greatness is that I haven't, completely figured it out yet myself, even though I've seen all the videos. But it's so groovy. It's groovy as hell. It's got real 7-on-4 polymetric action, but it still retains that groove, and, a lot of restructuring and other things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and put Fabiank in A tier, because it's quite good with how it restructures and comes in on offbeat and all of that stuff. All that. You kind of have to tell people that it's in 7. I think maybe a lot of that can be... a lot of that sort of cleverness can come down to having one pretty fast beat that you can feel pretty easily permeating the whole thing, and then, you don't really have to worry too much about the oddness of the meter and, grouping it in a 4 and a 3. You're just kind of feeling a constant beat like this, which can really work for how you subdivide Angine de Poitrine songs. Okay, next up, Matazyklek. Now this one is really cool because it deals with different scales of 5 in an intelligent way, and I transcribed this one, so I would know. Yes, for all of you who were mad in the comments because I didn't, change the meter to 10 every time it used 10/4 and change it to 5/8 every time you had 8th notes. No, you don't know what you're doing. I do. Sorry. Matazyklek is great. Has phrases of different lengths. I like to say it has lengths of, 5/8, 5/4, and 5/2, I guess if you put it that way. And it explores those in a meaningful way, I believe. So I just think that one is really fun. It may not be as restructured as the others, but I think it's still groovy enough and so fun to feel especially the 5/8 high 8th note guitar part against what's going on. I think I'm going to put it in A tier because it's pretty mesmerizing, but you could convince me maybe to put it in B tier if you were really trying to, be philosophical about this and whatnot. Okay, next up, Sarniez. All right. I'm thinking Sarniez is... It's another one that explores 3-on-2, but it does it in a way that seems meaningful and not like how everyone else has done it. And the main reason I say that is because of the rhythmic shifts. You might be able to see from my transcription that if you have 4 bars of 12/8 and you make the 8th note subdivision the same, you can retain that 8th note and have 3 phrases of 4/4, which some people have also interpreted as 2 large bars of 6/4, which I think is also a fair interpretation. It doesn't sound like that as much to me. It sounds like 3 bars of 4/4, definitively, because of a big pause, you know, when you have that second bar. But I will say that the drum part re-articulates itself after 6 beats, like it starts over again. So I think maybe they're trying to get us to think they have 2 bars of 6/4, but it sounds like 3 bars of 4/4. So that's already interesting, right? And restructuring that same amount of beats, recontextualizing a riff to sound like that is interesting too. And they also displace the riff by 3/8 notes later. Now, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of scale that they use where, like, you know, they have something in 7/8 and then they play something in 7/4 against it to restructure an amount of beats. But I don't know of any other songs where they actually displace a beat forward or backward in that same way as Sarnia's. So I think Sarnia's got me to be excited about, you know, this kind of group playing things that were just 3-on-2 stuff again. And also, it presents a really cool narrative. So I think for that reason, it's quite clever. It's microchromatic. It sticks in my head in a good way. So I think I'm going to put it in A tier. Okay. This one is like a 4/4 polka. I really love the microtonality and the virtuosity in it, but I don't think there was a lot in it that made me genuinely confused. I will say, there is that part in the middle where, like, there are some high notes being added, and since those are in groups of 3 in kind of a subtle way, and maybe they sound a little bit offbeat compared to where the first beat starts, I was feeling a little bit of the 3-on-4 there in a good way. And of course they, you know, calcify that in the ending where they're hitting the groups of 3 all together and not really the backbeat as much. So that's kind of cool. And I think those clever little arpeggios for utsp, you know, they kind of got me a little bit. So I think I'm going to put that in C tier because it's definitely not as exciting as the things I hear in Saharnier and Ababa Hotel, but also it doesn't seem as basic as the ones in D tier. Okay, great. Yorzarad. Here we go. So, Yorzarad is something I've been wanting to rave about for a long time because, of course, it's in 7 and explores different scales of 7, right? You have 7/8 and 7/4 scales. But then there's a certain point, too, where you realize the guitarist is arpeggiating fast notes in 3 against it. So you get that, and like that first groove is already a bit cool because you're hearing like a 7/8 groove against a 7/4 beat, which like Rush does in Subdivisions, for example. And you already hear that, and that's already 2 different scales at once. And then if you hear a 3 against it, that's another scale. And then I think the way that scale evolves so that you're just hearing groups of 3 and then a little ending tag, and then there's big 4 crash hits against that at the end, recontextualizing it again. Like, it's just so good because the evolution comes so far, and we finally get 7/3. Like, with Fabiank, we got 7/4, and that's great. And that's, like, pretty rare, but, you know, it shows up in some places. But 7/3 in this kind of environment, I mean, I was just freaking out. I was so happy to hear that. It's especially satisfying to hear the groups of 3 arpeggios against, like, the normal 7/8 groove, before the 7/8 groove itself goes away later, and trying to count it out. I was thoroughly, I guess I wasn't stumped, but I definitely was like, oh, this doesn't line up in a way I would expect at all from this band. Yorzarad goes in S tier. Okay. And then finally, Angor. Angor's pretty cool. It's doing 3-on-2 stuff again, but it doesn't seem as narratively driven as Sarnia's or as confusing as Saharnier. So I think I want to rank it a little lower than those, but I don't think it should go in D tier because I still really enjoyed how Angor built up layers. And, you know, you're building up layers and you have 6 subdivisions, and there's sort of times where the physiology of what the instruments are playing will impact whether you hear it as being 3 beats divided into 2 pieces or 2 beats divided into 3 pieces. And those divisions are kind of ambiguous and depend on which ones are at the forefront and which ones have entered and all of that stuff. So since it wasn't discrete and obvious, I still want to give it points because it still instilled a little bit of a sense of confusion in me. Hearing the middle parts as I was trying to, like, hear one part as being, you know, 3 beats divided into 2, and hearing another part as 2 beats divided into 3. And I think they play with that in a really nice way. That doesn't really seem that basic. I think the Lemon Twigs song, Everything Harmony, also kind of does this. You have songs that are divided into 6, but they purposely kind of stress things funny, so you're not sure if it's supposed to be 3 beats divided into 2 or 2 beats divided into 3. So for that reason, I'm going to put Angor in C tier. Okay, everyone, there you have it. Angine de Poitrine polymeter tier list. What were your disagreements, thoughts, all that good stuff? Just one more disclaimer that I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video. This is a polymeter tier list. So I'm specifically ranking it on how hard the polymeter hits, how confusing it is, how much gratification that gives me as a rhythmic person. It doesn't really have to do with my full enjoyment of the songs. So, like, for example, the Sherpa solo and the Tameb's riffs are like, those are crazy, I love those. But I had to put them in D tier because there aren't a lot of polymetric explorations compared to something like Your Sarad. So, this doesn't represent my of the full like of the songs. It's just, purely on a polymetric basis. Sorry, guys, there was something I forgot to mention about the tier list in the video. I showed this to a friend, and they mentioned this. So, what I'd love to do here is say what the criteria are, essentially, for the tiers. So, if something is in D tier, I might still enjoy the song. I have the capability to enjoy any of these things, but if something is in D tier, it means that the rhythm is something I've heard before a lot of times in different places, and it doesn't seem particularly innovative. Like, I wouldn't hold it up as, like, a shining example of rhythmic innovation. It's just, kind of there and kind of good, and the rhythm is not really what's selling me on it. If it's in C tier, I think that it contains a mild amount of surprise that makes me think it's probably better than most of the stuff I'm hearing, but not so innovative that I would, think, oh, this has to be math rock because of how it adds up and stuff. If something is in B tier, it means that there was something genuinely surprising about it, rhythmically, but that I didn't have to think of putting it in any kind of alternative frameworks, or I wasn't genuinely puzzled by what I was hearing. We're kind of going for metric confusion here a little bit. If something is in A tier, that means that what we have going is probably a little bit puzzling, and I've heard shades of it before somewhere else, but that what you have is still so distinct that it can probably be best described with that song. And if it's an S tier, it's genuinely puzzling, thrilling, can't think of the metric construction anywhere else, and it's just, its own unique object. So, anyway, that's all I've got for you guys this time, and I'm really glad that I got to do this. So, I know I did it like 3 months too late, but it doesn't matter.